I live in a part of Pennsylvania that most people seem to have forgotten exists. It isn't the Amish country tourists take pictures of, and it isn't the rusted-out industrial zones near Pittsburgh. It's the deep, hollow silence of the north-central wilds. The kind of place where GPS maps are full of blank spots, streetlights are a luxury, and cell service is more of a pleasant surprise than a guarantee. Here, the darkness has weight. It presses against your windows. Nothing stays open late because, frankly, there's no one to work and no one to serve. The towns are dying, shrinking inward like drying fruit. Nothing ever happens here. Or at least, nothing people talk about out loud in the light of day. But everyone knows the rule: don't stop on the back roads. The only place with a pulse 24/7 is a Quick Mart located just off what is technically called a highway. In reality, it's just a long, arrow-straight, 2-lane blacktop on a slicing through the state forests, used mostly by truckers wanting to cut travel time and avoid tolls. From my front porch to that gas station is about a 25-minute drive if you're pushing it, and I usually am. Out here, that counts as close. My sleep schedule has been destroyed for years. I work freelance in tech, mostly back-end coding and video editing, and my brain simply refuses to function while the sun is up. My golden hours are between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. That's when the world finally shuts up and leaves me alone. Or so I tell myself. That night, a Tuesday in late October, the air was crisp enough to hurt your lungs. I was deep in the flow. Noise-canceling headphones on, laptop open, the screen's cool blue glow, the only light in the room. I had been editing a drone sequence for a client for 4 hours straight. Hours slipped by unnoticed until my stomach decided to remind me of its existence. It wasn't a gentle nudge of hunger. It was a violent spasm, as if my body suddenly realized it had been running on fumes and caffeine for 8 hours. I pulled off my headphones. The silence in the house was deafening. The floorboards settled with a groan that sounded too much like a footstep. I checked the time. 2:14 a.m. I tried to ignore it, but the hunger was distracting. I shut my laptop, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the night. The drive was completely sterile. No oncoming headlights, no deer, no movement, just thick viscous darkness and the yellow cone of my high beams carving a tunnel through it. The forest on either side of the road stood like a solid wall of black pine and oak. I rolled the window down an inch to get fresh air, but the wind sounded like a low whistle, almost like someone breathing, so I rolled it back up. When I pulled into the Quick Mart parking lot, the contrast with the forest's gloom stung my eyes. The sodium vapor lights cast everything in a sickly, washed-out orange hue. I immediately noticed how empty it was. Usually there are at least a couple of semis idling in the gravel lot out back, their engines chugging like sleeping beasts. But tonight, the massive paved lot held only 2 vehicles. One was a rusted sedan by the far pump, looking like it had been abandoned there since the 90s, resting on flat tires. The other was a dirty, windowless brown van parked in the deep shadows along the side of the building, near the air pump. The van was old, maybe a late 70s Chevy or Ford, with rust eating away at the wheel wells. Engine off, lights dark. It looked like a bruise against the brick wall. I parked under the canopy, bathed in the fluorescent light, feeling exposed. Inside, the store was even quieter than the lot. The hum of the industrial refrigerators and the buzz of a dying overhead light felt deafeningly loud. The smell of burnt coffee and industrial pine cleaner hit me instantly. A guy I'd never seen before was behind the counter. A kid, maybe 20, looking pale and bored. He was nodding off over his phone, headphones in, completely checked out. He didn't even lift his head when the electronic door chime announced my arrival. I walked to the back. I grabbed a pre-packaged turkey sandwich and a lukewarm energy drink. While I debated getting a candy bar, I started pacing the aisles. It's a habit. I have ADHD, and standing still is torture for me, especially when my blood is a cocktail of exhaustion and artificial sugar. That's when I saw him. I was in the snack aisle, looking at the reflection in the glass of the frozen food section opposite me. At first, my brain refused to process the image. It looked like a pile of clothes left on the floor, but then the pile moved slightly. At the very back of the store, in the dead space where the aisles end and the employee's only door sits, a man was sitting on the floor. Not slumped over drunk, not asleep curled in a ball, not fallen. He was sitting, cross-legged, perfectly upright, spine rigid, at a 90-degree angle to the floor. He was facing the blank white wall next to the dairy cooler, staring at nothing. I almost walked past, my rational mind already churning out excuses. Maybe he dropped a contact lens. Maybe he's restocking the bottom shelf. But he wasn't restocking anything. His hands were resting on his knees, palms up. A chill, sharper than the October air outside, raced down my spine. Something about his posture was unnatural. It was too tense, too artificial, like a mannequin that had been posed and left there. He was wearing a heavy brown Carhartt-style coat, stained with grease, and worn jeans that ended in heavy work boots. I could only see his back and profile. I should have just walked to the counter. I should have paid and left. But curiosity is a disease. I told myself I just wanted to check if he was okay. Medical emergency, maybe? In reality, some primitive part of my brain needed to identify the threat. I walked down the parallel aisle, pretending to browse the chips. The floor was sticky. My sneakers squeaked, and the sound seemed to echo like a gunshot in the quiet store. The man didn't flinch. I reached the end of the aisle. I was now about 10 feet away from him. "Excuse me?" I said. My voice came out cracked and dry. "You okay, man?" I didn't get an answer. I didn't even get a twitch. I took one step closer, peering around the corner of the shelf to see his face. The second, the literal millisecond, I cleared the shelf. His head snapped toward me. It wasn't a smooth human turn. It was a sharp, mechanical jerk. Snap. I froze, my hand clutching the cold energy drink so hard the aluminum crinkled. His face. God, I still see it when I close my eyes. He looked normal at a glance, but the details were all wrong. His skin was waxy, too smooth, like he didn't have pores. His eyes were huge, not just wide with surprise, but unnaturally distended, as if the eyelids had been surgically removed. The whites of his eyes were yellowed, and the pupils were blown out. Black holes swallowing almost the entire iris. He wasn't blinking. His eyes were watering, tears streaming down his cheeks, but he didn't blink to clear them. His lips were trembling, a fast, violent micro-vibration like a hummingbird's wings, or like he was standing in freezing cold even though the store was stiflingly warm. A low sound was coming from his throat, a high-pitched whining noise, like a dog in pain or leaking steam. He sat in that lotus position, but his muscles were taut as steel cables. He looked like he was containing some colossal kinetic energy that was ready to tear him apart from the inside. But the worst part was the recognition. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking into me. No anger, no madness, no smile, just absolute predatory emptiness. We stared at each other for maybe 5 seconds. In my head, they stretched into an eternity. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the refrigerator hum. Then, very slowly, the corners of his mouth began to pull up. It wasn't a smile, it was a grimace. Skin stretching to reveal gums and long yellow teeth. The whining noise in his throat stopped abruptly. He uncrossed his legs. He didn't use his hands to help himself up. He just unfolded. He rose to his feet with a fluid, jerky motion that shouldn't have been possible for a man of his size. He was tall, too tall, maybe 6'5". Self-preservation finally screamed louder than curiosity. I spun around and didn't walk. I speed walked, bordering on a run, back to the counter. I slammed the items down. "Hey!" I yelled at the cashier. The kid jumped, ripping his headphones out. "Whoa, dude, chill. Ring me up now." I looked back over my shoulder. The aisle was empty, but I could feel it. I could feel the air shifting. "That'll be $11.50. I threw a $20 bill on the counter. Keep it." I grabbed the bag and turned to the door. In the reflection of the glass door, I saw him. He was standing at the end of the aisle I had just left. He wasn't walking toward me. He was just standing there, leaning out, his head cocked at a severe angle, watching me leave. That smile was wider now, impossibly wide. I pushed through the doors and sprinted. The cold air hit me like a slap. I fumbled for my keys, dropped them, cursed, snatched them up, and practically dove into my driver's seat. I locked the doors before I even put the key in the ignition. My hands were shaking so bad I missed the ignition slot twice. Start. Start, you piece of junk. The engine turned over. As I threw it into reverse, my headlights swept across the side of the building. The brown van. The driver's side door was open, and then I saw him. He wasn't in the store anymore. He was running. He burst out of the shadows near the air pump. He wasn't running like a person runs. His arms were flailing at his sides, his stride too long, his head bobbing loosely. He was sprinting toward the van. I slammed the gas, tires screeching on the pavement as I peeled out of the lot. I didn't look back until I was on the highway. Just drive, I told myself. He's just a junkie. Just a crazy guy. You're in a car, he's in a van from the 70s. You're fine. I merged onto the highway and floored it. My old Ford Focus groaned in protest as it picked up speed. The road was empty. The darkness swallowed everything again. I checked my speedometer, 75 miles per hour. A minute passed. Then 2. My heart rate began to slow down. Then I checked the rear view mirror. Darkness. Nothing. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I reached for the radio, needing some noise to drown out the memory of that face. Then, without warning, the interior of my car lit up like it was noon. Twin beams of blinding light blasted through my rear window. He hadn't just caught up. He had been driving behind me with his lights off. He was right on my bumper. I screamed, involuntary and sharp. The van was so close I couldn't see its grille, only the windshield. And through the glare, I saw the silhouette of the driver. He was thrashing, banging his hands on the steering wheel in a rhythmic, violent tempo. I accelerated. 80 miles per hour, 85. The steering wheel began to shudder. The van didn't fall back. It matched me perfectly. Then the van's headlights died. Complete blackness in the mirror. For a second, I thought he had given up. But then I realized he was still there. He was just invisible. I was doing 90 miles an hour on a winding forest road with a maniac driving blind inches from my rear bumper. I tapped my brakes, just a tap, to flash my lights, hoping to scare him. Bad idea. Wham! The impact felt like a bomb went off. My head snapped back into the headrest. The car fishtailed wildly, tires screaming as they lost grip on the cold asphalt. I fought the wheel, overcorrecting, then correcting again. My car drifted into the left lane, then back to the right. The van's lights flickered back on. He was right there. He hit the horn. It wasn't a normal car horn. It was a modified air horn, a deep, distorted bellow that sounded like a freight train screaming. He held it down. I grabbed my phone from the passenger seat. No service. Of course. Come on, come on, I yelled at the bars. One bar. Searching. No service. The road ahead was curving, a sharp S-bend coming up. I knew this road. If I took it at 90, I'd flip. If I slowed down, he'd ram me off the cliff edge. I made a choice. I saw the curve sign reflecting in my high beams. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I waited. The van surged forward for another hit. I didn't brake. I downshifted. The engine roared, revving into the red line. My car slowed abruptly without brake lights. The van slammed into me again, harder this time. Glass shattered. My rear windshield exploded, showering the back seat in safety glass. But the impact pushed me forward. I gripped the wheel, staring at the road. As we hit the curve, I slammed the brakes and yanked the wheel left, cutting across the center line into the oncoming lane. It was a desperate, stupid maneuver. My car spun 180 degrees. I was sliding backward, facing the van. For a split second, time froze. My headlights swept across the van as it shot past me. The driver was looking right at me. He wasn't holding the wheel. Both his hands were pressed against the windshield, palms flat, and he was screaming, jaw unhinged, eyes wide, laughing or screaming. I couldn't tell. The van couldn't make the turn. It missed my front bumper by inches. It kept going straight. It hit the gravel shoulder, became airborne, and plowed into the dense forest at 80 miles per hour. The sound was hideous. Metal tearing, trees snapping like matchsticks, crunching glass. Then a heavy final thud as it hit something solid, deep in the ravine. Silence returned instantly. My car came to a stop in the middle of the road, engine stalled. Steam hissed from my radiator. I sat there for a full minute, unable to breathe. I waited for the explosion. I waited for the fire. But there was only darkness down in the ravine. I didn't get out to check. I didn't play hero. I restarted my car. It made a horrible grinding noise, the bumper dragging on the asphalt. But it moved. I drove the remaining 10 miles to the nearest town with a police station. I walked into the lobby covered in sweat and shaking so hard I couldn't hold a pen to write my statement. The police took it seriously. They saw the damage to my car, the shattered glass, the paint transfer on the bumper. 3 cruisers went out to the site. I waited at the station drinking stale coffee, wrapped in a blanket. An hour later, the sheriff came back. He looked disturbed. Not skeptical, disturbed. "Son," he said, sitting down opposite me, "we found the crash site." "Is he dead?" I asked. The sheriff rubbed his face. "We found the tracks. We found where the vehicle left the road. It took out 3 pine trees. There's glass, metal debris, oil on the ground." "So where is he?" "That's the thing," the sheriff said quietly. "There's no van." I stared at him. "What?" "The tracks go into the ravine. They tear up the earth for about 50 yards, and then they just stop. There's a crater in the mud where the impact happened. but the vehicle isn't there, and there are no footprints leading away. They searched until dawn. They brought dogs. The dogs refused to go near the impact crater. They just whined and pulled at their leashes. They found a piece of the van's bumper embedded in a tree. It was rusted brown metal. But the van itself? Gone. Like it had dissolved into the earth. I moved away a month later. I couldn't handle the silence of the woods anymore. I live in Philadelphia now, on a busy street where sirens wail all night and there are always people around. But I still don't sleep well. Because sometimes, when I'm walking home late, I see a brown van parked on a side street. And I know it's probably just a contractor or a delivery driver. But then I remember the look on his face as he flew past me, hands on the glass. He wasn't screaming in fear, he was excited, and I know, somewhere out there on those dark Pennsylvania roads, he's still driving, waiting for the next car to pass, waiting for the night shift. I live now, but this story takes place in the summer of 2022, when I was working what I now understand was a fool's errand. A sketchy logistics job specializing in refurbished, high-end electronics and custom PC parts. Officially, I was a contractor. Unofficially, I was a mule, spending most nights driving alone through parts of the Southwest that felt less like terrain and more like a hostile alien planet actively trying to erase you. The company insisted I use my personal F-150, an extended cab with industrial suspension, for stability. Tonight, I was hauling 27 sealed crates of specialized, military-grade memory banks. My cargo was worth more than my truck, my house, and my entire bank account combined. That fact wasn't just heavy in the back of my mind. It felt like a physical weight strapped to my chest, a permanent layer of low-grade anxiety. The job description was a euphemism. Time-sensitive delivery in low-population density areas. The reality was isolation, adrenaline, and a growing, creeping sense that something was fundamentally wrong with the silent stretches of the American West after 1 a.m. That night, I was on the final leg of a run, stretching from Phoenix to Lovington. It was 1:17 a.m., and I was driving east along Route 82, skirting the southern edge of Lincoln National Forest. This area doesn't feature hills. It features abrupt, violent rock formations and canyons. The road narrows here. The scrub pine and juniper press in close, and the darkness feels thick and physical, like your headlights are barely punching holes through a sheet of black oil. The cab of my truck was silent except for the low thrum of the engine and the occasional sharp ping of gravel hitting the undercarriage. My radio was useless, just static punctuated by the occasional screech of what sounded like distant mechanical grinding. I hadn't seen another sign of life, headlights, taillights, or even roadkill, in nearly 50 minutes. I was trying to focus on a true crime podcast, using the narrator's soothing, monotonous voice as a shield against the oppressive silence when I rounded a long, sweeping bend. Ahead, nestled awkwardly on the gravel shoulder, were hazard lights blinking orange, slow, methodical. It was a small, beat-up red hatchback, one of those cheap economy cars that look out of place anywhere west of Dallas. It sat too far off the shoulder, slightly tilted into the shallow ditch, looking broken and vulnerable. As I got closer, my high beams illuminated a woman standing beside it. She was holding her phone up over her head, slowly turning in a complete circle, desperate and theatrical, like she was performing a ritual, praying for a signal from the sky. I eased off the gas immediately. I dropped down to 5 miles per hour. My interior lights were off, my windows tinted. I was a black shadow approaching her distress signal. My first instinct, honed by months of driving these routes, was absolute avoidance. Don't stop. Don't engage. A single disabled car is the oldest bait in the book out here, especially in this part of New Mexico at 1:17 a.m., where the nearest county response is 45 minutes away. But the ethical weight was crushing me. I thought of my sister. I slowed the F-150 down to a crawl, dropping the transmission into a low gear. The woman didn't wave for help. She sprinted toward my truck, already trying the passenger door handle before I even fully passed her. Click. The lock held. Thank God for central locking. I stopped the truck fully, leaving a car length between us so I could see both her and the road ahead in my mirrors. I powered down the passenger window exactly 3 inches, a sliver of an opening, just enough to speak through, but not enough for a hand or an object to slip inside. She rushed the gap, her face appearing suddenly in the cone of light. She was young, on maybe mid-20s, wearing a thin jacket and jeans. Her face was pale and slick with sweat despite the cool desert night. Her eyes were darting everywhere. My car died. Dead stop. I can't get a signal. I just need a ride to the nearest station, she pleaded, her voice high and breathless. It was shaky, fast, and disjointed. It wasn't classic, fearful panic. It was a frantic, almost forced urgency. I maintained my calm, using my official contractor voice. I hear you, but I can't open the door. I'm hauling sensitive material. I will drive to the first spot I get service and call the state patrol for you. What happened to the engine? Did you hit something? She didn't answer any of the questions. Her focus was terrifyingly narrow. She just kept leaning in, repeating the same phrase, like a broken cassette loop. Just drive. Please, just get me out of here. I need to go right now. My gut tightened into a knot of cold steel. That single-minded repetition was wrong. A genuinely stranded person pleads for a phone or a blanket. They don't demand a high-speed getaway. Look, I'll call 911 right here. I'm going to raise the window now and I'm going to drive. She slammed her palm flat against the window. It made a sickening wet slap that echoed in the silence of the cab. You have to drive me now. They're coming. Her eyes were fixed not on me, but on the darkness behind my truck, and then darting wildly to the road ahead. And that's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't just sweat and road grit. It was copper and something harsh, chemical, like industrial ammonia mixed with old, stale blood. The feeling in my gut didn't just scream. It was ringing alarms loud enough to shatter glass. This wasn't a stranded motorist. This was a well-executed professional trap. But I was stopped. The engine was idling. If I floored it now, she would be out of sight and the people waiting for me would be prepared to cut me off. I was already compromised. I made a terrible calculation. I have the high ground. I have the engine power. And I have the equalizer. I told myself I wasn't defenseless. I had a Glock 43 holstered just under the steering column, secured with magnetic clamps. It was loaded and chambered. My hand dropped slowly, deliberately, resting 3 inches from the holster. I leaned across the seat and hit the lock switch, raising the window the last 3 inches. Click, clack. I unlocked the door. She was inside in a flash. Too quickly. She didn't offer a single word of thanks. She exhaled a soft, wet sound and slammed the heavy door shut. The atmosphere inside the truck changed immediately. The air felt colder, heavier, charged with static. The chemical smell intensified, making my eyes water. I threw the truck into drive, but I paused just for a second. The mirror. I risked a final crucial glance back at her car, in my side mirror. That's when I saw him. A massive man stepped out from behind the hatchback. He was wearing heavy dark clothes, too thick for a desert night. He didn't rush. He simply stood upright, watching us, illuminated by my quickly receding tail lights. Before I could even process that, another figure appeared further up the road. Not behind her car, but about 50 yards ahead, stepping directly from the tree line and into my high beams. He was holding something long in his hands. It was pale wood. A thick, splintered baseball bat, or perhaps a 2x4. His face was obscured by the blinding glare, but his posture was unnervingly patient. He hadn't run, he was placed. A silent, immovable barricade. Adrenaline hit me like a physical punch. They had me boxed in. I didn't just floor it, I dumped the gas pedal into the firewall. The F-150 roared, the turbos screamed, and the tires briefly lost purchase before biting the asphalt. The woman beside me whipped around in her seat. She didn't scream at me to stop. She started screaming at the windshield, a guttural, frantic noise that had nothing to do with surprise or fear. It was pure rage and urgency. Her hand went immediately down into her massive, shapeless purse. I didn't wait to see what she was grabbing. I ripped my pistol from the holster. I didn't point it at her. I didn't have to. I brought the chrome slide up until the dome light caught it, resting the firearm visibly on the steering wheel right where the horn button was. The muzzle was pointed forward away from her, but the message was blindingly clear. This ride is over. She froze instantly. Her hand, which was halfway into the purse, stopped mid-movement. Her screaming cut off like someone flipped a circuit breaker. Silence. Complete, terrifying silence. She stared straight ahead through the windshield, her expression now utterly blank, devoid of the frantic energy she had seconds before. The change was instant and sickening. She became a piece of furniture. We drove like that for nearly 30 minutes. I was doing 95 miles per hour on a road designed for 55. Every rattle, every pothole felt like a deliberate attempt to break my concentration. My knuckles were white on the wheel. The gun sat between us, a silent, volatile barrier. The two men were long gone, swallowed by the desert. But my terror was now trapped in the cabin with me. She didn't move. She didn't fidget. She just sat there, spine rigid against the seat, a perfect passenger. The only sound was the wind, the engine, and the terrifying, hollow ringing in my own ears. I kept glancing at her, trying to find a flicker of humanity, of fear, of regret. Nothing. Her eyes remained wide, fixed on the empty road ahead. But then, 15 minutes into the silent drive, I heard it, a small, dry, scraping sound, almost too faint to register over the engine noise. I risked a quick peripheral glance. Her free hand, the one that wasn't frozen near her purse, was moving. Slowly, methodically, she was tracing something on the dusty vinyl dashboard with her index finger. It wasn't random doodling. It was a repeated small geometric pattern, a perfect tiny square, over and over again, like a ritualistic obsession. She didn't look down at it. She just kept tracing, her eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. I felt a fresh bead of sweat crawl down my temple. I swallowed hard, tasting bile. "Don't touch anything," I finally managed, my voice a croaking rasp. She didn't acknowledge me. She didn't stop tracing the pattern. I said, "Don't touch anything." I didn't yell. I spoke with the lowest, coldest register I could muster, focusing the warning entirely on the deadly object resting on the wheel. The hand stopped. It rose slowly and came to rest on her knee, joining the other, palms facing up, perfectly still. Just like that man in the quick mart in the story I once read. Perfect stillness, perfect composition. I was hallucinating from exhaustion and terror. I saw faces in the tree line. I heard the faint screeching from the radio static again. The truck flew over a slight rise, the tires momentarily leaving the ground. When we landed, my headlights illuminated a road sign. Artesia 5 miles? Civilization? I started talking, needing to break the silence, needing her to know I was in control, and that this nightmare was ending. We are approaching Artesia. There's a pilot truck stop there. Bright lights, lots of people. When I stop, you get out. You take your purse, you leave everything else. You will walk away and never look back. Do you understand? Nothing. Just the fixed, wide, terrifying stare. When we finally reached the outskirts of Artesia, the high sodium lights of the pilot truck stop shone like a massive, glorious beacon. I slowed down and pulled into the crowded lot. The noise was a symphony. Truck air brakes, idling engines, distant radio chatter. I drove straight into the busiest fuel island I could find. I slammed the truck into park. "Get out. Now." She looked at me for the first time since I drew the weapon. Her lips parted and a single word slipped out, too soft for the noise outside. "No." It wasn't a plea, it was a statement, a refusal. I didn't argue. I didn't wait for the terror to solidify into action. I lunged across the center console, yanked her door open, and screamed, "Out! Now! Police are here!" She stumbled out onto the asphalt. She didn't fall. She straightened up, looked around the crowded lot at the semis and the pumping stations, and then, slowly, she started smiling. That empty, stretched, terrifying grin. She wasn't screaming nonsense this time. She just stood there in the pool of light, watching me, her eyes flat and empty. A massive, burly trucker saw the commotion and started jogging over, yelling, "Hey, what the hell's going on?" I didn't wait. That was my cue. I threw the truck into reverse, then into drive, and burned rubber getting out of that lot. I didn't look back. But the last image I have is her standing there, a silent statue under the truck stop lights, watching me disappear. I drove 30 miles down the road before I stopped at a deserted rest area in full daylight. My hands were still shaken violently. I checked the passenger seat. I vacuumed the broken glass from the rear window and then focused on the floor. Between the cushions, I found the first object, the dead burner cell battery. A distraction, maybe? The second object made my blood run cold, chilling me far worse than the confrontation itself. Resting neatly on the floor mat, right where her feet had been, and placed carefully to avoid the floor ridge, was a sealed industrial pack of heavy-duty nylon zip ties. They were black, thick, rated for extreme stress, capable of restraining a person easily. They weren't forgotten. They were left behind. A message. I threw them into the nearest industrial dumpster and spent half an hour scrubbing the inside of my door and seat down with disinfectant, desperately trying to get rid of the chemical smell and the feeling of her presence. I never reported any of it. What was I going to tell the police? That a woman I willingly picked up, who then sat silently while I drove 90 miles per hour with a gun out, left behind evidence of a terrifying organized abduction attempt. They would have held me for observation and my specialized cargo would have been exposed. I changed my number, bought a new truck, and quit the logistics job a week later. I moved to the coast, where the population density is high and the darkness doesn't feel so heavy. But I still look over my shoulder constantly, and every time I have to buy new zip ties for a home project, I freeze. I remember the cold chrome gun on the steering wheel and how being armed was the only language that monster understood. I know, without a doubt, that it saved my life. And I know the desert road crew is still out there waiting for the next car to stop, waiting for the next lonely driver to fall for the friendly wave and the disabled red hatchback